I was sitting at my husband's family dinner table, trying to enjoy the smell of roast chicken and the sound of light conversation. The mood was pleasant until my sister-in-law, Savannah Brooks, suddenly stood up and cleared her throat, acting like she owned the room. She opened her laptop with a flourish and turned the screen toward the family. My stomach dropped instantly when I saw the first slide. She started presenting a business idea, my business idea, to everyone. "This is the startup I've been developing for months," she said with a confident smirk. Every slide on that screen, every concept, every strategy, and even the specific logo designs were things I had created. I had spent countless late nights working on this in secret, and now she was claiming it as her own. Savannah looked around the room, making sure she had everyone's attention, and added, "Not everyone can think on this level of innovation." A few relatives laughed and nodded, impressed by her supposed brilliance. My hands went cold under the table as I realized she had gone through my private files. I felt a surge of betrayal so strong it made my head spin. Then, the front door opened and a man in a charcoal suit stepped inside. The man walked into the dining room with a calm, professional stride that made the room go completely still. "My name is Jonathan Pierce," he said, his voice steady and clear. "And I represent legal counsel monitoring the intellectual property behind this presentation." Savannah's confident smile vanished in an instant. Her cursor froze right in the middle of a slide that detailed my unique marketing strategy. She looked at the man, then at the family, her eyes darting around in confusion. "What are you talking about?" she asked quickly, her voice hitting a high, nervous note. Jonathan didn't even glance at her at first. Instead, he looked straight at me and gave a small, respectful nod. "Ms. Whitmore, your original development files and timestamps are fully secured and verified," he announced. My husband, Ethan Hale, shifted uncomfortably beside me. He looked between me and the lawyer, suddenly looking very uneasy. The air in the room became heavy with tension. My family members, who had just been cheering for Savannah, were now looking at her with growing suspicion. I finally took a deep breath and sat up straight. The secret I had been protecting was finally out, but not in the way I had ever expected it to be revealed. The silence in the room was so thick, you could almost feel it. I finally found my voice and spoke up, looking Savannah right in the eyes. "That idea is mine, Savannah," I said, my voice surprisingly firm. Savannah let out a sharp, forced laugh that sounded more like a bark. "No, it isn't, Clara. Don't be ridiculous," she snapped back, trying to regain her footing. She looked at the family, hoping for support, but everyone was staring at Jonathan Pierce. Jonathan didn't say a word. He simply stepped forward and placed a thick, leather folder on the dining table. Inside were my early drafts, my initial sketches, and digital timestamps that dated back over a year. He spread the papers out so that everyone could see the progress of the work. Savannah's face turned a blotchy red as she looked at the evidence. She tried to claim that she must have had the same idea at the same time, but the details were too identical to be a coincidence. Even the spelling errors I had made in my first draft were visible on her slides. Her claim was collapsing right in front of our eyes. I felt a strange mix of relief and anger watching her struggle to find a new lie to tell. Savannah started to panic, her hands shaking as she tried to close her laptop. "This is a misunderstanding. I've been working on this in my own time," she yelled, her voice getting louder and more desperate. Jonathan Pierce didn't move an inch. He calmly pointed to a specific line in the folder that detailed a unique coding sequence I had developed. "Ms. Brooks, this specific sequence was logged on Ms. Whitmore's private server 6 months before you even registered your current domain," he stated. The family members gasped. My husband, Ethan, looked at Savannah with a look of pure disappointment. He had always defended her, but even he couldn't ignore the facts staring him in the face. Savannah looked around the table, but no one would meet her eyes. The brilliant entrepreneur she had pretended to be was disappearing, replaced by someone who had been caught stealing from her own family. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a sudden, sharp hatred. "You think you're so smart, don't you?" she hissed. I didn't answer her. I didn't need to. The man in the charcoal suit had already proven that I was the one who had done the work. The dinner was officially over, but the consequences were just beginning. The rest of the evening was a blur of uncomfortable whispers and cold stares. Savannah tried to storm out, but Jonathan Pierce reminded her that he was still monitoring the situation and that any further use of the materials would result in immediate legal action. She left the house without saying another word, leaving a trail of embarrassment behind her. My husband, Ethan, sat quietly on the sofa, his head in his hands. He admitted that he had noticed Savannah spending a lot of time near my office lately, but he had assumed they were just bonding. He felt guilty for not noticing the signs sooner. I realized that my desire for privacy had actually made it easier for her to sneak around. I had wanted to surprise everyone with my success, but instead, I was forced to defend it like a crime scene. Jonathan stayed for a few minutes to explain the next steps. He told me that my intellectual property was safe, but we needed to be careful about how we handled the family side of things. He warned me that Savannah wouldn't go down without a fight. As I watched him leave, I felt a heavy weight on my chest. My business was safe, but my family was broken. The next morning, the fallout became even more intense. Savannah started sending frantic messages to our group chat, claiming that I was the one who had stolen from her. She tried to flip the story, telling everyone that I had hired a fake lawyer to intimidate her into giving up her hard work. A few of our more distant relatives actually started to believe her, or at least they were confused enough to stay neutral. I felt like I was living in a nightmare where the truth didn't matter. I spent the morning reviewing my files with Jonathan over the phone. He assured me that her claims were baseless and that we had the law on our side. But the emotional toll was exhausting. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart raced. I had worked so hard to build something positive, and now it was being dragged through the mud by someone I was supposed to trust. Ethan tried to stay supportive, but I could tell he was struggling with the conflict. He loved his sister, but he knew she was wrong. The house felt cold and empty, the silence filled with the echoes of the previous night's confrontation. I realized that Savannah wasn't just after my business. She was after my reputation. As the days went by, the division in the family grew deeper. Savannah refused to back down, and she even started a small social media campaign to promote her idea. She was acting like she was the victim of a corporate bully. It was infuriating to watch her use my words and my vision to gain sympathy from strangers. Jonathan suggested that we send a formal cease and desist letter, but I hesitated. I didn't want to be the one who officially tore the family apart in court. However, my hesitation only made Savannah bolder. She started reaching out to potential investors using the very pitch deck she had presented at dinner. One of those investors happened to be a colleague of mine, and he called me immediately to ask what was going on. He knew the idea was mine because I had discussed it with him months ago in confidence. He told me that Savannah was telling people I was unstable and that I was trying to block her success out of jealousy. That was the final straw for me. I realized that by trying to be nice, I was allowing her to destroy everything I had built. I called Jonathan and told him to move forward with the legal proceedings. The arrival of the official legal notice at Savannah's house caused another explosion. She showed up at our front door, screaming about how I was trying to ruin her life. She blamed me for her losing her dream and claimed that I was being heartless. Ethan tried to calm her down, but she wouldn't listen. She kept saying that she had refined my idea and made it better, so it was basically hers now. It was a bizarre kind of logic that showed she had no respect for my work at all. I stood my ground, telling her that refining someone else's work without permission is still theft. She eventually left, but not before making a scene that the neighbors definitely heard. My husband looked at me with a tired expression, and for a moment, I wondered if he was blaming me for the drama. But then he walked over and hugged me, telling me he was proud of me for standing up for myself. It was the first time in days I felt like I wasn't fighting this battle alone. We both knew the next few weeks would be a test of our marriage and our family ties. While we were dealing with the family drama, Jonathan Pierce was working behind the scenes to secure my business partnerships. He managed to convince the investors that I was the sole owner and founder of the concept. He showed them the original development logs and the legal protections we had in place. The professional world began to see the truth, even if the family was still confused. This was a huge relief, as I was worried that Savannah's lies would scare away the funding I needed to launch. I started to regain my focus, spending more time in my office and less time worrying about the group chat. I realized that the best way to win was to make the business a success. If I could launch the startup and show the world what I had created, Savannah's claims would become irrelevant. I felt a new surge of energy and determination. I wasn't just working for myself anymore. I was working to prove that the truth always wins. Savannah was still out there, trying to cause trouble, but she was slowly losing her audience. The people who actually understood business could see right through her. A week later, the family held a peace meeting at my mother-in-law's house. I didn't want to go, but Ethan insisted it was the only way to stop the rumors. When we arrived, Savannah was already there, looking like she had been crying for days. She sat in the corner, acting like a wounded animal. My mother-in-law started the meeting by saying she just wanted us all to get along and that maybe we could share the business idea to keep the peace. I almost laughed out loud at the suggestion. Sharing my life's work with someone who had stolen it was not an option. I looked at Savannah and asked her why she thought she deserved a piece of something she hadn't built. She started crying harder, saying she was just trying to help the family and that she didn't know I would be so possessive. The manipulation was so obvious that it was painful to watch. I stood up and told everyone that this wasn't a family squabble, it was a legal matter. I told them that if they continued to support Savannah's theft, I would have no choice but to distance myself from everyone. The room went silent. The peace meeting ended in a stalemate. My mother-in-law was upset that I wouldn't compromise, and Savannah left feeling like she had successfully made me look like the villain. However, something shifted in Ethan that night. On the drive home, he was unusually quiet. When we finally got inside, he looked at me and said, "I think I finally see it, Clara. She's not just confused. She's being malicious." He told me he was tired of her using the family as a shield for her bad behavior. This was the breakthrough I had been waiting for. With Ethan fully on my side, I felt like I could handle anything. We decided to stop attending family events until the legal situation was resolved. It was a difficult decision, but it was necessary for my mental health. I needed to focus on my launch and my future. I started working even harder, fine-tuning every detail of the startup. I knew that the mind-blowing part of my story was only a few weeks away. The launch was going to be bigger and better than anyone expected, and Savannah wouldn't be able to claim a single part of it. As the launch date approached, the pressure became almost unbearable. I was working 18-hour days, making sure the software was perfect and the marketing was ready. Savannah was still trying to sabotage me by posting negative reviews and spreading rumors online, but her influence was fading. People were starting to notice that her stories didn't add up. Jonathan Pierce kept a close eye on everything, ready to pounce if she crossed the line into actual harassment. I felt like I was running a marathon while someone was trying to trip me every few feet. But every time I saw a new piece of progress, I felt a sense of pride that outweighed the stress. I was building something real, and no amount of lies could change that. I started to receive positive feedback from early testers, and the excitement was building. I knew that the launch would be the ultimate vindication. I just had to keep my head down and stay focused on the goal. My husband was my rock, keeping me fed and encouraged during the long nights. We were a team, and that was the most important thing. The day of the launch finally arrived. I was nervous but ready. We held a small digital event to announce the startup to the public. As the numbers started to climb, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. People were actually using the product and they loved it. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive, and the media started to pick up the story. I was being interviewed by major tech blogs, and my name was finally being associated with my work. Savannah was nowhere to be found. She had been silenced by the sheer weight of my success. The family members who had doubted me were now sending congratulations texts, but I didn't feel much like responding. I remembered who had stood by me when things were dark. I realized that success is the best revenge, but it's also the best filter for finding out who your real friends are. I felt a deep sense of accomplishment. I had protected my idea, survived a family crisis, and built a successful company. The man in the charcoal suit had done his job, and now it was time for me to do mine. A few days after the launch, I received a surprise phone call from a major venture capital firm. They had been following my story and were impressed by the way I had handled the intellectual property dispute. They told me that they valued founders who knew how to protect their assets. They offered me a significant investment that would allow me to scale the business even faster. This was the moment I had been dreaming of for years. I realized that the drama with Savannah had actually made me a stronger and more attractive founder to investors. It showed that I was serious about my business and that I had the legal foundation to support it. I accepted the offer, and the news of the funding went viral. Savannah's attempts to steal my idea had unintentionally led to me getting the best funding possible. It was a poetic kind of justice that I never could have planned. I felt like I was finally on the right track. My startup was no longer just an idea. It was a growing empire. The news of the funding was the final blow for Savannah. She tried one last time to claim that she was a silent partner in the company, but Jonathan Pierce was ready. He released a public statement clarifying that she had no involvement in the company and that her claims were entirely fraudulent. He even mentioned the legal notice we had sent her. This finally shut her down for good. The family members who had been neutral were forced to accept the truth. Savannah was exposed as a liar on a professional level, and her reputation was ruined. She stopped posting on social media and went into hiding. My mother-in-law finally apologized to me, admitting that she had been wrong to ask me to compromise. I accepted her apology, but I made it clear that things would never be the same. I had learned a valuable lesson about trust and boundaries. I was no longer the sweet girl they could walk all over. I was a CEO, a founder, and a woman who knew her worth. The house was finally quiet, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. Despite the success, there was still a lingering sense of sadness about the family split. Ethan was still distant from his sister, and the holidays were going to be difficult. I tried to stay positive, focusing on the future of the company and the team I was building. I hired several new employees, and the office was buzzing with excitement. I felt a deep responsibility to the people who were now relying on me for their livelihoods. This new focus helped me move past the personal drama. I realized that my life was so much bigger than Savannah's pettiness. I was creating something that would help thousands of people, and that was what truly mattered. I started to enjoy my success, taking small breaks to celebrate with Ethan and our close friends. We were building a new life, one based on honesty and mutual respect. The startup was thriving, and the future looked bright. I knew that there would be more challenges ahead, but I felt prepared to handle them. I had the legal protection, the financial backing, and the personal strength to succeed. One afternoon, I was sitting in my new office when Jonathan Pierce walked in. He had a final set of papers for me to sign. He told me that the legal dispute with Savannah was officially closed. She had signed an agreement stating that she would never again claim any involvement in the company or the idea. In exchange, I had agreed not to pursue further damages. It was a fair deal that allowed everyone to move on. Jonathan looked at me and smiled. "You did a great job, Clara," he said. "Most people would have folded under that kind of pressure." I thanked him for everything he had done. He hadn't just been my lawyer. He had been my shield. As he left, I looked at the papers and felt a sense of closure. The battle was over. I was the sole owner of my business, and my name was cleared. I felt a surge of gratitude for the journey, as difficult as it had been. It had taught me who I was and what I was capable of. I was ready to lead my company into the next phase of growth. As the weeks turned into months, the business continued to grow at an incredible rate. We were expanding into new markets and hiring more people. The name Whitmore Startups was becoming a recognized brand in the industry. I was being invited to speak at conferences and share my story of resilience. I always made sure to mention the importance of legal protection and believing in yourself. Savannah remained out of the picture, and the family eventually settled into a new, albeit quieter, routine. We didn't see her at family gatherings, and no one really talked about her. It was as if she had never existed. It was a strange kind of peace, but I accepted it. I was busy living my dream, and I didn't have time for the past. Ethan and I were closer than ever, our marriage strengthened by the fire we had walked through together. We were happy, successful, and finally, truly seen. I realized that the best part of my story wasn't the money or the fame. It was the fact that I had stayed true to myself. One day, I received a letter from Ethan's younger brother who had stayed out of the drama entirely. He told me that he was inspired by my success and that he wanted to start his own business. He asked me for advice on how to protect his ideas from the beginning. I felt a sense of pride as I wrote back to him, sharing everything I had learned. I told him to trust his gut, hire a good lawyer, and never let anyone tell him he couldn't do it. I realized that my struggle had become a blueprint for others in the family. I was no longer the outsider who had married in. I was the leader who was showing them a new way to live. This felt like the ultimate win. I wasn't just successful. I was influential in a positive way. I continued to grow the company, always keeping my values at the center of everything I did. The startup was a reflection of my hard work and my integrity, and I was proud of every part of it. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when I was featured on the cover of a major business magazine. The article told the story of my launch and the legal battle that had preceded it. It was a fair and honest account of everything that had happened. When the magazine hit the stands, I felt a strange sense of calm. The whole world knew the truth now. There was no more room for lies or rumors. I was the founder, the creator, and the owner. I sat in my office and looked at the cover, a small smile on my face. I had come a long way from that dinner table where my idea had been stolen. I had fought for my vision and won. The man in the charcoal suit had been the catalyst, but I was the one who had seen it through. I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. My life was finally my own, and the future was whatever I wanted it to be. A few years later, the company was so successful that we were preparing for an IPO. It was a massive undertaking, and I was busier than ever. But I always made time for the people who mattered. Ethan and I had started a family of our own, and the house was filled with the sound of laughter and play. We made sure to teach our children the value of hard work and honesty. I never forgot the lessons I had learned from the drama with Savannah. I kept my business and personal lives separate, but I was always open and honest with the people I loved. The legal protections I had put in place were still there, a silent reminder of the importance of being prepared. I felt a deep sense of peace. I had built a legacy that would last for generations. I was a CEO, a mother, and a woman who had found her power. As I stood on the floor of the stock exchange on the day of the IPO, I thought about that night at the dinner table. I thought about the fear and the betrayal I had felt when I saw my slides on Savannah's screen. And then I thought about the moment Jonathan Pierce walked into the room. I realized that the hardest moments of my life had actually been the ones that prepared me for my greatest success. I wasn't afraid of the future anymore. I knew that I could handle whatever came my way. As the bell rang and the first trades were made, I felt a surge of joy. My company was public, and my vision was being shared with the world. I was the founder of something special, and no one could ever take that away from me. I looked at Ethan in the crowd, and he gave me a proud thumbs up. We had made it. Looking back, I realized that Savannah's attempt to steal my idea was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to step out of the shadows and claim my place in the world. It showed me who my real friends were, and it strengthened my marriage. It gave me the legal and financial foundation I needed to succeed. It was a difficult and painful experience, but it was also a gift. I wouldn't change a single thing about the journey. I am a stronger, wiser, and more successful person because of it. I am the owner of my story, and I am finally, truly seen. The startup was just the beginning. I am ready for whatever the next chapter holds. The family eventually held a small reunion, and for the first time, everyone was genuinely happy to see me. There were no more whispers or cold stares. They respected me as a professional and as a member of the family. Savannah didn't attend, and that was okay. We had all moved on. I felt a sense of belonging that I had never felt before. I was no longer the quiet sister-in-law. I was a respected leader. I enjoyed the day, talking and laughing with everyone. It was a beautiful reminder that time heals all wounds, especially when the truth is on your side. I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the life I had built. As I sat on my porch that evening, watching the sunset, I felt a profound sense of peace. My business was thriving, my family was happy, and my heart was full. I had turned a moment of betrayal into a lifetime of success. I had protected my idea and reclaimed my life. I was the CEO of my company and the owner of my destiny. I took a deep breath and smiled. I was finally free to be exactly who I was meant to be. The journey was long and hard, but it was worth every second. I am Clara Whitmore, and this is my story. It's a story of resilience, integrity, and the power of believing in yourself. And for the first time, I am fully and completely seen.